The fluorescent lights of the courthouse parking garage flickered, humming low, an unsteady staccato that made Jasmine Taylor's pulse jump. She pulled the hood of her black sweatshirt over her head, hoping to slip past unnoticed. Her briefcase, heavy with files of clients wrongly arrested, bumped against her thigh as she moved toward her car. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" A gruff voice barked from behind. Jasmine froze. She turned to see Officer Mark Hensley, badge gleaming under the dim light, eyes narrowed like a predator spotting prey. "Evening, ma'am. You look suspicious." His tone was casual, but the weight behind it made her stomach churn. "I'm a lawyer," she said, her voice calm but tight. "Just leaving work." Hensley's gaze lingered on her hoodie, the curve of her jaw, the darkness of her skin. "A lawyer? Huh? Funny. You look more like someone who causes trouble." Her hand tightened around the briefcase. Inside were years of evidence, cases exposing corrupt cops who had ruined lives. And now, she realized she was the next target. The echo of his keys jingling felt like a noose tightening. Jasmine's breath caught. She could feel the cold metal of the parking gate, the harsh glare of the overhead lights, the small scuff of concrete under her shoe. "You're not going anywhere until I decide," Hensley said. And then the garage fell silent, except for the hum of the flickering lights. Waiting. Jasmine's heart pounded, and in that instant, she knew this confrontation wasn't about law. It was about power. And the stakes were far higher than she'd ever faced. The courthouse parking garage smelled of damp concrete and motor oil, a low, metallic tang that seemed to cling to Jasmine Taylor's hoodie as she hurried toward her car. The fluorescent lights above flickered, buzzing intermittently like the heartbeat of a nervous city. Her briefcase, stuffed with client files, cases of men and women arrested without cause, bumped against her leg. Each step echoed in the cavernous space, swallowed by shadows. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" Jasmine froze, her spine stiffening. The voice was abrupt, clipped, official, yet tinged with suspicion. She turned, hood half drawn over her face, to find Officer Mark Hensley standing near a concrete pillar, badge catching the dim light. His posture was casual, but the glint in his eyes was sharp, predatory. "I'm leaving," she said calmly, adjusting the strap of her briefcase. "I work here." Hensley took a step closer. "Sure, looks like trouble walking." His tone was almost conversational, but each word carried an edge. Jasmine could hear the faint jingle of his keys, the metallic rhythm, a low drumbeat of intimidation. "I'm a lawyer," she said, tilting her head to meet his gaze. Her voice was steady, but inside, her pulse thrummed like a warning siren. "A lawyer," he repeated, eyebrows raised. "Funny, you don't fit the usual profile." Her stomach twisted. She had heard this before, the assumption, the code hidden in words. She kept her hands visible on the briefcase. And what profile would that be? He shrugged, a lazy, dismissive gesture. "The kind that doesn't cause problems. You don't want to be here alone, do you?" Jasmine's breath caught. The garage felt colder, shadows stretching across walls like fingers. She could feel the concrete under her shoes, slick from a recent drizzle, and the hum of the flickering lights made the space feel smaller, suffocating. "I'm not going to cause trouble," she said. "I just want to get to my car." Hensley's gaze lingered, sharp and assessing. "You sure about that?" There was no humor in his tone, only authority wielded as a weapon. The keys in his hand gleamed briefly as he tapped them against his palm. Jasmine knew that look. It was the same look she'd seen in police reports, in news clips, in the fear-filled eyes of clients who had been stopped for nothing more than existing in the wrong skin. "Please," she said, her voice quieter now but no less firm. "I'm just leaving." He stepped closer, and the smell of his uniform, a mix of cologne, sweat, and stale coffee, hit her. "I don't think you understand me, lawyer girl," Hensley said, a smirk tugging at his lips. "I decide who moves freely here, and I decide when trouble starts." Jasmine's hand tightened around her briefcase. Every file inside was a record of injustice, each page a testimony of corruption and wrongful arrest. And she knew, in that instant, she was the next case. "Mark Hensley," she said evenly, though her teeth pressed together. "I've read your files. You're under internal review. If you touch me or detain me without cause, you'll be held accountable." The smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of irritation, then a quick attempt to mask it. "You lawyers think you can scare me?" he asked. "I do this every day. You don't get to lecture me." Her jaw clenched. She could feel the adrenaline, sharp and cold, in her veins. "I'm not lecturing," she said. "I'm warning. You're accountable to the law, just like anyone else. Even you." Hensley tilted his head, studying her like she was an insect under a magnifying glass. "Big words for someone in a hoodie," he said. The emphasis made it sting, a microaggression sharpened into a threat. "Maybe I should run a check, see if you've been causing trouble elsewhere." Jasmine swallowed. She could feel her heart hammering, the adrenaline threatening to betray her calm exterior. Her hand brushed against her phone in her pocket, a silent reassurance. She knew that if she called it in, she could summon witnesses, cameras, backup, but doing so would escalate the situation. She needed to survive this first. "I've caused nothing but justice," she said softly, almost to herself, yet loud enough for him to hear. "And I'll keep doing it, no matter what you want to call trouble." Hensley laughed, a short, bark sound that bounced off the concrete walls. "Justice, huh? You mean trouble dressed up in a suit?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You think wearing that hoodie makes you invisible? Doesn't change who you are or what I see." Jasmine could see the shadows on his face, the angles of menace cutting through the dim light, and yet within her, something unyielding flickered. She straightened her shoulders, met his gaze, and let a single line land cold and precise. "I've won cases that put officers like you behind desks, making them accountable. Remember that when you decide your next move." Hensley's eyes flickered, caught in a moment of disbelief. She could feel the tension thickening, the air almost solid, and then the hum of the lights dipped, flickered. A car door slammed somewhere in the distance. Footsteps echoed from the stairwell. He glanced toward the sound, distracted, and in that brief instant, Jasmine seized it. She stepped back, hand gripping her briefcase, ready to move, ready to flee, yet unwilling to show fear. "You're not going anywhere until I say so," he said, voice low, almost a growl. Jasmine froze. The fluorescent light above flickered violently, shadows dancing across Hensley's face, elongating the menace etched there. In that suspended moment, she realized the confrontation wasn't about law, about rights, or even about hoodies. It was about power, and she was in the eye of it. Her lungs tightened, her hands trembled slightly, but her mind raced faster. She had prepared for this, not just the threats, but the subtle, insidious way people like Hensley use fear as leverage. She'd spent years navigating unjust courts, intimidating officers, and harrowing interrogations on behalf of clients. This was another battlefield. The garage seemed impossibly vast, yet claustrophobic. Every echo of his keys, every flicker of light, every distant sound of a car engine felt amplified. Jasmine felt the weight of all those wrongfully accused, all those silenced, pressing on her shoulders. "You can't stop me," she said finally, a whisper edged with steel. "I fight for justice. That's what I do. And you're only a temporary obstacle." Hensley's smirk returned, but it was forced now, fragile, tested. He shifted his weight, keys still in hand. Jasmine knew this was far from over. The stakes were higher than her commute, higher than any parking garage encounter. And yet, in the flickering light and the hum of the garage, she found clarity. Fear would not move her. She inched backward, keeping her eyes locked on him, ready to act if needed, ready to survive this first round. Somewhere, deep in the shadows of the concrete walls, a camera blinked. Somewhere, the faint echo of the courthouse's fluorescent heartbeat kept time with hers. And in that liminal space, between threat and escape, Jasmine Taylor made her silent vow. She would hold him accountable, no matter what it took. The garage seemed to hold its breath. And so did she. The lobby of Langston and Pierce Law felt cavernous, yet oddly protective, a bubble of polished marble and muted chatter. Jasmine Taylor's heels clicked on the stone floor, each step measured, deliberate. The courthouse garage encounter still pulsed in her mind, a lingering tension she couldn't shake. "Rough night," Malik Johnson's voice cut through her reverie. He was already at the firm's espresso machine, dark eyes scanning the newspaper in his hand. You look like you wrestled a grizzly and lost. Jasmine offered a faint smile. Parking garage, she said, dropping her briefcase onto the leather chair in the waiting area. Hensley. Malik froze mid-sip. Mark Hensley? The same one who, Harasses half the courthouse. She nodded, pulling out her phone and tapping to check messages from clients. He tried to intimidate me. Called me trouble dressed up in a suit. Said I didn't fit his profile. Malik shook his head. That guy. Always as a stick-up his. He cut himself off, realizing Jasmine didn't need the verbal venting. I know, she said softly, eyes narrowing to ceiling tiles as if they could hold the weight of the world. I've read his internal reports. He's been flagged before. And yet her voice trailed, heavy with irony. Still there, still wielding power. Malik leaned against the counter. So what do you do now? File a complaint. Jasmine exhaled, slow and deliberate. I will, but this isn't just about me. It's the pattern. The systemic. She paused, letting the word hang like smoke in the air. The system protects people like him. People who intimidate, harass, and cover their tracks. And my job is to make sure the victims get heard. Malik raised an eyebrow. You think your little hoodies and briefcases can change the courthouse? She smirked faintly, but her eyes remained sharp. Not little, Malik. Evidence. Strategy. Persistence. Those are my weapons. He nodded, finally accepting the gravity in her tone. All right, Ms. Justice. Spill, what's the plan? Jasmine sat, resting her elbows on the polished table. She picked up a folder and slid it toward him. Clients. Cases I've won against wrongful arrests. Each one exposes patterns, racial bias, abuse of authority, failure of oversight. Hensley isn't unique. He's a symptom. Malik flipped through a few pages. Jesus, this is extensive. I've spent years building this, she said, voice tight. And I've seen how these officers think they're untouchable, until someone like me reminds them they're not. He looked up, concern flickering in his eyes. You don't think he'll retaliate? Her gaze hardened. I expect it, and I'll prepare for it. But I won't stop, Malik. Not after what I've seen. Not after what my clients have endured. The conversation was interrupted by the ringing of her office phone. Jasmine answered on the third ring, voice professional, tight around the edges of irritation and alertness. Taylor. Jasmine. A client's anxious voice quivered on the other end. I just got released. No charges. But they threatened me again. I can't. I'm coming. Jasmine cut in, instantly on her feet, slipping the phone into her pocket. Sit tight. I'll be there. She hung up and exhaled, a mixture of frustration and resolve. Malik watched her pack her folder and phone. Every day it's something. Every day, she said, adjusting her blazer. And it never ends until someone like me, forces accountability. This isn't just about a parking garage threat. It's about making the courthouse remember that justice isn't optional. And it isn't blind, just selective. They walked toward the elevators. The muted hum of fluorescent lights above, the faint aroma of coffee and polished stone, felt almost cinematic, a stage set for a real-world battle. In the elevator, Jasmine's reflection caught her eye. Hood up, briefcase in hand, expression tight with determination. She looked like any other lawyer heading home after a long day. But the shadow behind her, Hensley's looming threat, was anything but ordinary. Do you ever get used to this? Malik asked quietly as the elevator ascended. No, she admitted. You never get used to knowing the system is stacked against people who look like us. But you learn to navigate it, and you learn to fight it. That's the point. By the time they reached your client's apartment, the late afternoon sun was dipping below the city skyline, spilling gold over brick buildings and graffiti tag walls. Jasmine could feel the tension still lodged in her chest, but it was focused now, sharpened into purpose. The client, a young man named Darnell, opened the door, eyes wide with relief and residual fear. Ms. Taylor, he said, voice trembling. Thank God you're here. Jasmine stepped inside, scanning the modest apartment for anything unusual. "You're safe now, Darnell. Sit. Tell me everything from the start." He recounted his encounter with local police officers, stop-and-frisk tactics, intimidation, and near arrest. Jasmine listened, letting the words paint a picture. Fear, anger, frustration, injustice. Her mind mapped every detail, every officer's pattern, every procedural misstep. "So he knew me," Darnell said finally, "but he didn't care about the law. He just," his voice broke, "wanted to scare me." Jasmine placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "That's right, and it's why I exist in this space. Not just to protect, but to challenge, to ensure people like him are accountable." Darnell nodded, tears glinting in the low light. "I don't know how you do it, Miss Taylor, facing them every day." "I don't do it alone," she said, "and I'm not fearless. I just don't let fear decide for me. We fight, strategize, collect evidence, make the system see its mistakes." Darnell took a shaky breath, seeming to draw some courage from her. Jasmine sat at her sleek, minimalist desk, the soft hum of the office air conditioning washing over her like a thin veil of calm. The city's afternoon chaos barely intruded through the wide windows, but inside her office, tension coiled tight in her chest. She opened her laptop and began typing, her fingers moving deliberately over the keys, drafting a formal complaint against Officer Mark Hensley. Malik leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Internal Affairs isn't going to take this seriously," he warned. "You know how it works. He'll probably file a counter-complaint just to annoy you." "I know," Jasmine said without looking up, her tone calm but resolute. "But I have to document it. Every intimidation, every racialized comment, every violation procedure. If I don't, it never happened. And if it never happened, nothing changes." Malik's expression softened. "You've got the patience of a saint." "Not patience," she corrected, finally meeting his gaze. "Strategy. Patience is passive. Strategy is active. I plan every step." She clicked through Hensley's past complaints in the Internal Affairs database. Patterns emerged like dark constellations. Complaints dismissed with vague explanations. Officers covering for each other. Bureaucratic loopholes stretched thin. Every dismissed claim was a small injustice stacked on another. Malik muttered, "Unbelievable. He's untouchable." "Not for long," Jasmine said, tapping a folder labeled case files. "Wrongful arrests. I built evidence, witness statements, patterns. He's arrogant enough to believe the system protects him. But arrogance is his weakness. Evidence exposes arrogance." She began drafting the complaint, meticulous in detail. Date, time, location. Exact quotes. Witnesses present. Behavior observed. Threats implied. Intimidation tactics. Each point documented, verifiable. Internal Affairs cannot ignore it if the report is airtight. Malik peered over her shoulder. "Sounds like a legal massacre waiting to happen." "Exactly," Jasmine said, hitting save and reviewing the document again. "But I won't send it blindly. I need corroboration. Security camera footage from a parking garage. Statements from anyone who saw or heard the encounter. Every small detail matters." A knock at the doorframe made her glance up. "Yes." Her assistant, Carla, peeked in. "Clients waiting." And Malik said you might want a coffee refill. "Thanks, Carla," Jasmine said, keeping her focus on the complaint. "I'll be there in a minute." Carla hesitated, eyes flicking to Malik. "Everything okay?" "Everything fine," Jasmine said, though her jaw tightened imperceptibly. "We're just making sure the truth gets recorded." Once Carla left, Jasmine returned to the complaint. She typed with deliberate precision, recalling every word Hensley had spoken in the garage, every inflection, every smirk. She annotated each phrase, noting the racial undertone, the implied threat. Malik paced behind her desk. "You really think documenting it is enough?" Jasmine didn't look up. "Documentation is the first step. After that comes strategy, exposure, and accountability. Without records, the system erases victims. With records, even the arrogant must reckon." Her phone buzzed. A message from Darnell. Thanks, Ms. Taylor. I feel safe. For now. She felt a flicker of satisfaction, but immediately returned her focus to Hensley. When the draft was complete, Jasmine leaned back, reading every line critically. Her eyes scanned for ambiguity, any hint of personal bias that could be dismissed. Clear, factual, verifiable, she muttered. Nothing subjective, nothing emotional, just evidence. Malik shook his head, leaning closer. You're clinical. Cold. I don't know how you do it. I'm not cold, Jasmine said softly. I'm precise. Emotional responses don't win against entrenched power structures. Facts do. Documentation does. Strategy does. I fight with the tools that matter. She clicked attach files, including the screenshots, timestamps, and witness statements. She paused before hitting send. Her finger hovered over the mouse. You sure? Malik asked. I have to be, she replied. If I don't, Hensley and officers like him will continue believing the system shields them, and every person they intimidate, every wrongful arrest they execute, will go unchallenged. With a deep breath, she pressed send. Internal Affairs received the complaint, and a faint ping confirmed its submission. A small victory, but the weight of what came next pressed against her. Malik exhaled. Now we wait. Not just wait, Jasmine corrected, her eyes returning to Hensley's file. We prepare. Evidence, strategy, potential leaks to media if necessary. Every step documented. Every angle covered. He thinks he can intimidate me, but the game has changed. The office was quiet now, the soft hum of the AC punctuated by the occasional typing from nearby desks. Jasmine closed her eyes for a brief moment, imagining the moment Hensley would realize his actions were under scrutiny. Malik broke the silence. You ever wonder if all this fighting the system, if it's worth it? Jasmine opened her eyes, gaze steady, unwavering. Every time a client walks free, every time someone isn't wrongfully convicted, every time the system is forced to acknowledge injustice, that's worth it. And yes, it comes at a cost. Fear, stress, sleepless nights, but I've chosen this battlefield, and I won't back down. The phone rang again. Another client, another emergency, another case that demanded immediate attention. Jasmine sighed, already reaching for it. Before picking up, she glanced at Hensley's file on her desk. A fleeting image of the parking garage came to mind. The flickering lights, the hum, the keys jingling menacingly. She could almost hear his voice. I decide when trouble starts. Trouble had started, and Jasmine Taylor was ready. She answered the phone with calm authority. Taylor. A voice on the other end trembled. Miss Taylor, it's happened again. Jasmine stepped out into the late afternoon streets, the city alive with its usual hum of traffic, car horns, and distant construction. Even in the crowd, she felt a prickling awareness, a weight in the small of her back that told her eyes were on her. It wasn't paranoia. She had trained herself for this. She had seen the patterns before. Cops who thrived on fear, watching, following, waiting for a misstep. She adjusted her hoodie, pulling it slightly over her forehead, and glanced around. The usual crowd of pedestrians blurred past, unaware of the silent predator she imagined in their midst. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Malik. How's the client? The message read. Safe. For now. She typed back, pausing before hitting send. She scanned the street again. A dark SUV rolled past slowly, tinted windows reflecting sunlight and shadows. She noted the license plate. She'd seen that vehicle before, Hensley's. A chill ran down her spine, not from fear, but from recognition. This was escalation, and she'd anticipated it. Hensley was no longer content with verbal threats or intimidation in a garage. He wanted control in public spaces, to remind her she was being watched. She ducked into a small cafe, ordering a coffee, and settled by the window. The barista, oblivious to her internal calculus, smiled warmly as she handed over the cup. Jasmine sipped carefully, eyes scanning the street. The SUV lingered across the road, engine idle. She noted the subtle movements. Slight tilt of the head, the faint reflection of a badge in the driver's visor. The car was more than surveillance. It was a message. "You're staring at the street again," a familiar voice said. Jasmine turned to see Malik, sliding into the chair opposite her. "I noticed a vehicle," she said quietly. "Hensley." Malik frowned. "Already?" "Yes. Following, watching. Intimidation is part of the arsenal. It's psychological." Her voice was clipped but deliberate. "He's tested my reactions, my boundaries, seeing if I'll flinch." Malik glanced out the window, then back. "And you're?" "Not flinching," Jasmine said firmly. "Observing, documenting. Every detail counts. Patterns emerge through repetition." A waiter walked by, carrying a tray of pastries. Jasmine noted the brief contact with the street, the reflection of the SUV in the chrome. Hensley had no idea she was already collecting evidence. Photographs, timestamps, witness notes. Every move will be accounted for, every escalation noted. Malik leaned back, shaking his head. "You make it sound like a chess game." "Exactly," she said. "Every move, countermove, threat, and response is part of a larger strategy. And I intend to win." They spoke in low tones, careful not to attract attention. Jasmine's eyes continually darted to the SUV. Every glance, every signal from the vehicle reinforced the reality. This wasn't casual surveillance. It was intimidation, veiled as authority. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Darnell. "Saw the car. Be careful." She typed back quickly. "I know. I'm tracking it." Malik's expression darkened. "This is harassment. Open and public. You can't just document and hope it stops." "You underestimate the power of documentation," Jasmine said firmly. "This vehicle, every stop, every look, they all become part of the record. Evidence strengthens cases, strengthens accountability, and eventually that strength translates into exposure. That's when fear shifts from me to him." The SUV moved slowly down the street, the tinted windows reflecting a distorted cityscape. Jasmine noted its speed, the brief pauses at intersections, the way it angled slightly toward the cafe. "They're bold," Malik muttered. "They know you're aware." "And that's why they're reckless," she replied. "Complacency makes them careless. Arrogance makes them vulnerable." She sipped her coffee, letting the warmth anchor her nerves. Surveillance wasn't new to her, but escalation in public spaces always carried risk. Her fingers brushed the briefcase at her feet. Inside, files detailing wrongful arrests, abusive patterns, witness statements. Every client's story reinforced her purpose. A waitress passed again, asking if she wanted a refill. Jasmine shook her head, focusing instead on the slight turn of the SUV's wheels. Hensley wasn't leaving until he knew she had noticed him, until he could assert control, subtle but undeniable. Malik lowered his voice. "Do you ever feel tired? Like constantly being watched wears you down?" "Yes," Jasmine admitted quietly. "But fatigue isn't weakness. Awareness is survival. And vigilance is strategy. He thinks intimidation will break me. It won't. It will only give me more evidence." Across the street, the SUV stopped, engine idling. Hensley leaned slightly out of the window, scanning the cafe. Jasmine caught the glint in his eyes, the curl of a smirk that she had memorized from the garage encounter. "You see that?" Malik asked, voice tense. "Yes," she said calmly. "And he doesn't know I photographed him. Video from across the street. License plate. Angle of the engine. Time-stamped. Every detail is recorded." Malik exhaled. "You're methodical, I'll give you that. Most people would panic." "I'm not most people," Jasmine replied, her gaze locked on the street. "Most people aren't trained to see patterns. Most people can't turn intimidation into evidence. I can, and I will." Hensley's SUV eventually rolled on, tailing at a distance. Jasmine waited, letting it remain in view until it disappeared from the intersection. Only then did she exhale, a soft, measured breath. "Every move he makes," she murmured, more to herself than Malik, "is being documented. And when it all comes together, he will face accountability. Not speculation, not accusation, but concrete evidence. And that is unstoppable." Malik shook his head in admiration and concern. You're walking into a lion's den with a notebook and a hoodie. Jasmine smiled faintly, eyes narrowing. And I'm coming out with the mane. The office of Langston and Pierce Law buzzed softly with the low hum of printers, phone calls, and muted conversation. Jasmine Taylor sat at the conference table, files spread in front of her like a battlefield map. Across from her, 3 clients waited, each carrying the weight of wrongful arrest and systemic abuse. "Thank you for seeing us, Miss Taylor," said Mariah Jenkins, her voice tight with anxiety. I don't know what to do anymore." Jasmine nodded, keeping her expression calm, controlled. "You're here. That's the first step. Tell me exactly what happened." Mariah's hands twisted in her lap. "I was walking home. 2 officers stopped me, accused me of theft. They didn't even look at me. Just assumed, threatened to take me in. I begged them. I said I work at clinic, but they didn't care. I feel humiliated." Jasmine listened, eyes narrowed slightly, noting every inflection, every pause. She pulled out her notebook and began documenting. Names, dates, statements, witnesses. 2 neighbors saw it, Mariah said, voice trembling. But they didn't want to get involved. "Every witness counts," Jasmine said, reassuring yet precise. "And your story is valid. This isn't about perception. It's about facts, about systemic abuse. I've seen this pattern before." Across the table, another client, Darnell Thompson, spoke. "I was stopped 3 times in a week. Each time, different officers. They didn't even read my paperwork. Just assumed the worst." "Did you record any of it?" Jasmine asked. "I tried," Darnell admitted, "but I was scared. They intimidate you before you can think." "Exactly," Jasmine said. Her voice softened, a bridge between empathy and strategy. "Fear is their tool, but your experiences are evidence. They're testimony to a systemic problem, and together we can expose it." The third client, Jerome Clark, leaned forward. "I was arrested at work for something I didn't do. They called me a liar in front of my co-workers. I don't even know how to explain the shame." Jasmine's eyes lingered on him, steady, unwavering. "You're explaining it now, and I'll make sure the system listens. Every wrongful arrest, every humiliation, every abuse, documented, challenged, exposed. That's the point." Mariah spoke again, voice small but curious. "But how? How do you fight the police?" Jasmine leaned back, crossing her arms, with evidence, witness statements, patterns of behavior, previous cases that show precedent. And the law, that's how you fight power, methodically, strategically, relentlessly. Darnell's brow furrowed. "But officers like Hensley, they get away with it. They intimidate you, threaten you. They have connections." Jasmine tapped the edge of her notebook. Connections only matter until exposure, until documented patterns exist, until the public, the courts, the internal systems see the repeated abuse. Arrogance is only strong when unchecked. Once we show the repetition, the evidence becomes unstoppable. Jerome's hands tighten into fists. It doesn't feel unstoppable. Not when it happens to you. Not when you're the one humiliated in front of everyone. "I know," Jasmine said softly. "I've been there, and I know it hurts. But every time someone stands up, documents the abuse, and refuses to be silenced, we chip away at the arrogance, the impunity. That's how justice grows. Slowly, deliberately." Mariah shifted, eyes wide. You really think we can win?" "Yes," Jasmine said, voice steady, firm. "We have facts, documentation, witnesses, patterns, and the law. That combination, it's stronger than fear, stronger than intimidation, stronger than arrogance." Darnell leaned forward, hesitant. "And what about retaliation? Officers don't like being exposed." Jasmine met his gaze evenly. "We prepare for that. Documentation, legal steps, support networks. And yes, caution, but we don't let fear stop us. Fear is a weapon they want to use. We take it and turn it into strategy." A silence settled across the table, heavy but not oppressive. Jasmine let it linger, allowing her words to sink in. Every client had carried the weight of humiliation, fear, and injustice for months, sometimes years. And now, here, they were not alone. Finally, Jerome spoke, voice quiet but resolute. All right, I'll trust you. I have to. Otherwise, what's the point? Jasmine smiled faintly. The point is accountability. Every single one of you matters. Every story matters. Every pattern matters. And we're going to make them count. The conversation shifted as Jasmine guided them through procedural steps, documenting encounters, filing formal complaints, collecting witness statements, recording incidents in real time. Dialogue crackled with urgency as clients asked questions, voiced fears, and sought reassurance. Jasmine responded with calm authority, balancing empathy and strategy. Ms. Taylor, Mariah asked finally, her voice trembling, what about Hensley? He's everywhere. Even the thought of him following me terrifies me. Jasmine leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Then we document every sighting, every behavior, every pattern. He thinks intimidation will protect him, but exposure is stronger than fear. He will face accountability, just as we will protect you. Darnell exhaled, tension easing slightly. I can't believe this, that someone actually listens and fights back. Jasmine's gaze swept the room, lingering on each client. That's the point. I listen, I fight, and together, we build a record they cannot ignore. Malik, who had remained quietly supportive at the edge of the room, finally spoke. You make it sound almost simple. Jasmine's lips curled into a faint, ironic smile. Simple? No. Methodical? Absolutely. That's the difference. Fear may be simple, but justice requires preparation, focus, and courage. The clients nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. The room, once tense with fear and frustration, now vibrated with cautious hope. When the meeting ended, Jasmine escorted them to the elevator. Document everything. Stay vigilant. And trust the process. Your courage today is the first step toward accountability. As the doors closed, Malik leaned against the wall. You really think you can take Hensley down with paperwork? Jasmine adjusted her briefcase, eyes dark with determination. Not just paperwork. Patterns, precedent, strategy, persistence. He's arrogant, reckless, and predictable. And I'm ready. Malik sighed, half exasperated, half admiring. The city streets glowed orange under the fading afternoon sun, casting long shadows across the sidewalks. Jasmine Taylor walked briskly toward her car, briefcase in hand, hoodie drawn tight over her head. She had spent the day meeting clients, documenting incidents, and preparing for the confrontation she knew would come. Every step was deliberate, measured. A soft click behind her made her pause. She glanced over her shoulder. The same dark SUV, tinted windows glinting, lingered half a block behind her. Hensley. She exhaled slowly, as if settling into a routine she had rehearsed mentally dozens of times. She had anticipated escalation, and now it had arrived. Malik's voice echoed in her mind. You're methodical, Jasmine. Don't let fear dictate your steps. She continued walking, not breaking pace, letting her eyes scan the surroundings. Surveillance wasn't fear, it was evidence. Every turn, every pause, every slight adjustment of the vehicle could be documented. The SUV rolled alongside her, engine low, tires crunching against the uneven pavement. Hensley's window slid down slightly, just enough to reveal his face. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Going somewhere, lawyer girl, he called, voice carrying easily across the street. Jasmine stopped, her hand brushing against her phone. Yes, officer. Just heading home. Her tone was calm, controlled, but firm. You sure? Hensley continued, leaning slightly out the window. You don't want to get into trouble now, do you? I'm sure, she replied. Her eyes didn't waver from the street ahead. But I don't take threats from officers lightly, and I document everything. The smirk faltered for a brief moment. She had practiced this. Calm acknowledgement, firm boundary, subtle assertion. Hensley's posture stiffened, fingers drumming against the steering wheel. You always have to be so precise, don't you? He said. Why can't you just move along quietly? Jasmine's voice was low, deliberate. Because injustice doesn't move quietly. And neither do I. He leaned further out the window, almost imperceptibly, and the air between them thickened. Pedestrians passed, oblivious of the tension radiating from the silent standoff. You think you're untouchable, don't you? Hensley muttered, voice dropping to a near growl. Thinking the law is your shield. I think the law is my tool, Jasmine said. And arrogance is your weakness. Hensley's eyes narrowed. The vehicle lurched slightly forward, following her at a precise distance, testing her resolve. Jasmine noticed every detail. The tinted windows reflecting the setting sun, the angle of the tires, the slight hesitation at intersections. Each movement was data, each gesture evidence. She stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light. Hensley rolled up beside her, engine idling. Crossing the street slowly. Making me wait, he said, a smirk returning. Observing, Jasmine replied. Every move you make is noted. Every pattern will be recorded. He laughed, a short, sharp bark that bounced off the brick walls surrounding them. You think you can outsmart me? I don't think, she said evenly. I know. The light changed. Jasmine stepped forward, brisk and deliberate. Hensley followed, the SUV slowing, shadowing her every move. She reached her car, parked on the side street. The SUV stopped a few feet away, the engine still humming low, a subtle barrier. She unlocked the car, sliding into the driver's seat, while keeping her eyes trained on the vehicle. You're predictable, she said aloud, more to herself than to him. Every step, every hesitation, every glance. Hensley leaned closer to the window. You really think your little tricks will save you? Jasmine smirked faintly, fingers brushing her phone. Not tricks, documentation, evidence, patterns. You've given me everything I need. The SUV lurked for a moment longer before Hensley finally leaned back, revving the engine slightly, as if testing her patience. Jasmine started her car, moving slowly, keeping the SUV in view through her rear-view mirror. She took a series of deliberate turns, leading him through streets she had previously scouted mentally. Every pedestrian, every parked car, every streetlight was accounted for, every movement a note in the mental ledger of surveillance and evidence collection. Hensley followed, growing visibly frustrated. Why aren't you scared? He called out at one point, voice sharp. I don't use fear as a guide, Jasmine replied. You do. At the next intersection, Jasmine slowed near a security camera mounted on a pole. She took out her phone discreetly, recording both the SUV and the surrounding area. Time-stamped license plate, engine idling. Every detail would count. Hensley's hands drummed impatiently against the steering wheel. You're bold. Too bold, he muttered. And you're reckless, Jasmine said, eyes forward. Every action you take now, every attempt to intimidate, will be part of the record. Eventually, arrogance meets accountability. The SUV finally fell behind after a sharp turn Jasmine led them through, and she allowed herself a measured exhale. The tension didn't leave her. It was a reminder, a pulse she needed to stay sharp. She had survived this round, turned a trap into a tool, and gathered more evidence of harassment. Malik's voice, now in her mind, reminded her, every pattern counts. Every move is data. She pulled into a quiet side street near her office, parked, and stepped out. The city's evening glow cast long, angled shadows across the pavement. Her hands were steady on the briefcase. She had been followed, intimidated, and tested, but she had turned it into leverage. Every movement, every gesture of Hensley's arrogance was documented. Inside the office, she reviewed her notes. Timestamps, camera angles, witness statements, recorded audio. The trap had been laid by Hensley, but Jasmine had inverted it. He had given her everything she needed to build a strong case. Malik appeared in the doorway, brow furrowed. That looked tense. You should have seen the SUV behind me, Jasmine said, a faint edge of dark humor in her voice. Every move he made was predictable. Every pause, hesitation, glance, all recorded. You really see all this as strategy? Malik asked, shaking his head. Yes, Jasmine said firmly. He thinks intimidation gives him power, but it gives me evidence. And Jasmine Taylor sat in the corner office, sunlight slicing through the blinds, casting sharp lines across the polished wood desk. A new energy hummed through the room, the kind that followed exposure, visibility, and the possibility of systemic change. Today, the press would arrive. Malik leaned against the wall, sipping coffee, his gaze shifting nervously toward the door. You sure you want to do this? Once the media gets involved, there's no going back. I'm sure, Jasmine replied, her tone firm, measured. Exposure is the fastest path to accountability. Hensley thrives in darkness. We shine a light, and the system can no longer ignore him. The first reporter arrived, camera crew in tow. Jasmine greeted them with a calm, deliberate smile, her briefcase beside her like a shield and arsenal combined. Ms. Taylor? The reporter asked, voice clipped, curious. Can you summarize the issue here? Yes, Jasmine said, taking a deep breath. Systemic bias, abuse of authority, and intimidation tactics have been documented over years. Officer Mark Hensley has repeatedly harassed individuals, particularly Black community members, in public and private spaces. Today, we present evidence of these actions, seeking accountability and institutional reform. The cameraman adjusted his lens, and Malik muttered, You make it sound simple. Jasmine's eyes flicked to him. Methodical, not simple. As the interview continued, Jasmine laid out the evidence collected. Timestamps, videos, witness statements, documented complaints. Her voice was calm, precise, every word weighted with authority. Some critics may argue this is just a personal vendetta. The reporter pressed. How do you respond? It is not personal, Jasmine said firmly. It is systematic. The evidence speaks to patterns, not isolated incidents. We seek accountability for behavior that affects hundreds of citizens every year. The camera captured her eyes, sharp, unwavering, intelligent. The sound of city life outside the office windows filtered in. Sirens, car horns, distant voices. It grounded the scene in reality, a reminder that these were not abstract issues but lived experiences. Malik leaned closer as the reporter stepped back. Do you think people will understand the gravity? He asked quietly. They will, Jasmine replied. Once they see the evidence, once they hear the stories, once they understand the patterns. Fear cannot survive exposure, and arrogance cannot survive evidence. The interview concluded, and the crew packed up. Jasmine returned to her desk, reviewing the digital files, ensuring every timestamp, every video clip, every witness statement was clearly labeled and secure. Exposure was powerful, but accuracy and credibility were the backbone. Her phone buzzed. Darnell, her most recent client, texting, saw the news. You're amazing. Finally, someone listens. Jasmine exhaled, a mixture of satisfaction and concern. The media spotlight would protect some, but it would also escalate Hensley's response. She needed to be ready for every possible retaliation. Malik exhaled behind her. Do you ever get tired? All this, fighting the system, documenting every little thing. Facing someone like Hensley, it's relentless. Yes, Jasmine admitted softly, not turning from her screen. But if I stop, the abuse continues. If I hesitate, the patterns remain unchecked. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. And preparation is the armor. The next few days were a whirlwind. Calls from local news, requests for interviews, and attention from civil rights organizations flooded her inbox. Jasmine navigated each carefully, balancing visibility with strategic discretion. Every public statement was coordinated, every media outlet vetted. Malik frowned, scanning the headlines. Hensley's name is everywhere. You sure this won't backfire? Backfire? Jasmine repeated, tilting her head slightly. Exposure is double-edged. It reveals him to the public, yes, but it also forces accountability. He has underestimated the power of documentation, and now the media amplifies it. Emails from other law firms, advocacy groups, and community leaders arrived. Each one reinforced a growing network of support, a coalition of accountability. The tide was shifting, and Jasmine had become its pivot. Late one evening, the office phone rang. Jasmine answered, voice calm but alert. Ms. Taylor, a voice said, clipped wary. This is from Internal Affairs. We received your complaint, and the media attention has escalated concerns. Officer Hensley is being placed under temporary administrative review. We'll need to schedule an interview with you. Jasmine allowed herself a small, controlled smile. I will cooperate fully, and I'll provide all documentation required. She hung up and turned to Malik. He's being reviewed. Public scrutiny forces movement where bureaucracy stalls. The system responds only when visibility is unavoidable. Malik's expression shifted from concern to admiration. So all of this, the media, the clients, the evidence, it's working. Yes, Jasmine said firmly, but the fight isn't over. Exposure initiates accountability, but vigilance ensures it continues. Patterns are slow to dismantle. Fear lingers. Arrogance adapts. That's why strategy must be relentless. Later that week, Jasmine appeared on a televised interview, speaking calmly yet passionately about systemic abuse, racial profiling, and harassment in law enforcement. Every word was precise, every example substantiated. Viewers across the city and later the state watched as evidence, not conjecture, exposed patterns of intimidation. One news clip showed her describing Hensley's parking garage harassment, the SUV surveillance, and the public intimidation. The footage cut to images of timestamps, camera angles, and collected evidence. Even without her presence, the evidence spoke volumes. Jasmine knew the real battle wasn't the camera. It was a systemic inertia, the reluctance of the institution to act without external pressure. But today, she had shifted the balance. Visibility forced movement. Exposure demanded accountability. Malik watched from the side. You're changing the narrative, he said quietly. Not just for Hensley, but for everyone he's harassed. Yes, Jasmine replied, her eyes scanning the city skyline through the office windows. And that is only the beginning. Public attention is powerful, but strategy sustains change. Exposure ignites it, but persistence enforces it. By the evening, Jasmine returned to her office alone. The room was quiet, the hum of the city muted behind closed windows. She reviewed her notes, organized new evidence from the past week, and prepared for upcoming interviews with Internal. The office was quiet except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Jasmine Taylor sat at her desk, reviewing the latest updates from Internal Affairs. A sense of anticipation coiled tight in her chest. Every step of strategy, every piece of evidence, and every instance of documented harassment was about to converge. Malik, standing by the window, crossed his arms. You've been at this for hours. Are you ready? I've been ready, Jasmine said firmly, eyes fixed on her laptop screen. But readiness doesn't mean complacency. Hensley underestimates the weight of cumulative evidence, and that arrogance is his undoing. Her phone buzzed. A message from Darnell. Saw the news. Hensley's under review. Something's happening. Jasmine typed back, yes, exposure's working, but vigilance is key. Moments later, a knock at the door announced an Internal Affairs investigator. Jasmine rose, offering a measured smile. Ms. Taylor, the investigator said, extending a hand. We've reviewed your complaint along with supporting evidence. Hensley will be suspended pending a full investigation. We'll need you to testify in the upcoming hearing. Jasmine's fingers brushed the edge of her notebook, a subtle gesture of triumph. Of course, I've documented everything meticulously. Witnesses, timestamps, surveillance, audio, every instance of harassment. Malik exhaled softly. This is it, isn't it? The beginning of the end for him? Not just the beginning, Jasmine corrected. This is accountability manifest. Every threat, every intimidation, every public and private harassment captured. The system cannot ignore this. Later that day, news outlets began reporting Hensley's suspension. The headlines flashed across screens. Officer under investigation for harassment and racial profiling. Systemic abuse exposed through evidence. Jasmine followed each report closely, a sense of meticulous satisfaction settling over her. But she knew this was far from simple victory. Hensley's arrogance might still spark retaliation, legal maneuvers, or attempts to discredit her. Vigilance was necessary. That evening, the firm held a small debriefing with clients who had come forward. Mariah Jenkins, Darnell Thompson, and Jerome Clark sat across from Jasmine, their expressions a mixture of relief and cautious hope. "Ms. Taylor," Jerome began, voice tentative, "I can't believe this is happening. Hensley suspended? It feels unreal." "Unreal until accountability is enforced," Jasmine replied, calm and precise. "But this suspension is a result of documented evidence, witness statements, and systemic patterns. Your courage to speak out contributed directly to this outcome." Darnell leaned forward. "So we actually made a difference?" "Yes," Jasmine said, eyes meeting each of theirs. "Every documented complaint, every recorded incident, every witness statement. Your voices matter. They disrupt arrogance, and they demand accountability. This is just the start. Systemic change is gradual, but it begins with exposure." The morning sunlight filtered through the office blinds, painting stripes across the polished floor. Jasmine Taylor sat quietly at her desk, notebook open, but her mind was elsewhere. The city hummed beyond the windows, indifferent to the small victories and battles waged within law offices and courtrooms. Yet she felt a rare sense of calm, a momentary pause in the relentless tension of advocacy. Malik leaned against the doorway, coffee in hand. "I have to ask, how does it feel?" Hensley suspended, accountability underway, and the media spotlight highlighting systemic abuse. "Does it sink in?" Jasmine's fingers brushed the edge of her notebook. "It's complex," she said, voice low, deliberate. "There's satisfaction, of course. Relief, too. But the fight isn't over. Systemic bias, arrogance, and abuse of power persist. Today's victory is important, but temporary if vigilance falters." Malik frowned, taking a slow sip. "Sometimes I think you carry the weight of everyone's fear on your shoulders." Jasmine glanced at him, expression softening. "Perhaps, but I don't carry it alone. Courage exists in the clients, in the witnesses, in the community willing to speak out. My role is to channel it strategically, to document, to give it force through the law." Her phone buzzed with another message from Mariah, feeling safer every day. "Thank you, Jasmine." Another from Darnell. "Your work matters. It's changing things." She exhaled softly, a mix of fatigue and quiet pride. Small victories like these mattered. They were the seeds of systemic change, each one documented, amplified, and preserved. Later that afternoon, Jasmine met with the three clients for a follow-up at a quiet cafe. They shared smiles, tentative laughter, and the relief of voices finally heard. Jerome leaned back, stirring his coffee slowly. "I can't thank you enough, Miss Taylor. I never thought the system could actually listen." "You made it listen," Jasmine replied, voice calm but imbued with warmth. "Your courage, your willingness to speak, your persistence, it's as vital as any evidence or legal strategy." Darnell nodded. "I see it now. Fear may intimidate, but it doesn't stop truth. And truth matters." Mariah's eyes glistened. "I feel empowered. For the first time, I feel like I can walk freely again." Jasmine smiled faintly, heart swelling with tempered hope. "That's the point. Courage and documentation. Disrupt arrogance. You've all contributed to a record that cannot be ignored. And that makes a difference, not just for yourselves, but for everyone who faces similar injustices." The conversation shifted naturally to the practical steps ahead. Continued documentation, preparation for the full review hearing, and outreach to advocacy groups monitoring the case. Jasmine guided them with calm authority, balancing strategy with empathy. Later, in the quiet of her office, Jasmine reflected on the journey. Each encounter with Hensley had been a test of vigilance, courage, and strategy. Each client's story was a mirror reflecting the systemic patterns she sought to dismantle. The city's streets, once arenas of subtle intimidation, had become spaces where she could convert surveillance and harassment into documented accountability. The office was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon sunlight. Jasmine Taylor leaned back in her chair, fingers tracing the edge of her notebook. A sense of calm lingered, a rare pause in the whirlwind of systemic battles and legal strategy. The fight had not ended, but the first significant victory had been etched into the city's consciousness. Malik entered, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You finally taking a break?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Jasmine shook her head slightly, offering a faint smile. Rest is strategic, she said. I pause, reflect, and plan. That way, when the next challenge arises, I'm ready. Malik placed a cup beside her. And Hensley, facing potential termination, Jasmine said. Internal Affairs has escalated the case. Public scrutiny, documented evidence, and systematic patterns force accountability. He underestimated the weight of documentation combined with courage. Malik's expression softened. Do you ever think about him, about what happens next? Jasmine's eyes narrowed, thoughtful. Hensley's downfall is not personal revenge. It's institutional correction. Every pattern disrupted, every instance of arrogance exposed, contributes to a safer system. But vigilance remains necessary. Change is never guaranteed unless it's enforced. Later that week, Jasmine met with her clients once more. They gathered in a small conference room, the air tinged with relief, reflection, and cautious hope. Miss Taylor, Mariah Jenkins began, voice soft but steady, I finally feel safe, and I can finally imagine walking outside without that fear pressing on me constantly. That's the point, Jasmine said. Your courage to speak, your willingness to document, allowed this moment. Fear cannot dominate when it is paired with strategy and evidence. Jerome Clark leaned forward. It's strange, he admitted. We all felt powerless, and yet your guidance, your methodical approach, gave us back agency. You made us part of the process. Yes, Jasmine said, voice quiet, almost reflective. Systemic change requires multiple voices, all coordinated toward accountability. One voice alone rarely suffices, but together, even the most entrenched arrogance becomes vulnerable. Darnell Thompson spoke next, tone resolute. You think the system will really change? Or is this just temporary? Change is gradual, Jasmine admitted. Arrogance resurfaces, bias persists. But each documented act of accountability builds momentum. Today, Hensley faces consequences. Tomorrow, others will reconsider misuse of power, knowing exposure is inevitable. Progress is cumulative. Later, Jasmine returned to her office alone, reflecting on the months of struggle. The city streets beyond her window felt different now. Lighter, not because the system had changed completely, but because courage and documentation had made the first cracks visible. Her phone buzzed. An email from a civil rights organization requested guidance on implementing systematic documentation for police misconduct. Another from a local law firm expressed interest in collaborating for wider accountability. Jasmine reviewed each carefully, her mind cataloging potential next steps. Malik appeared in the doorway, voice soft. You've changed things, Jasmine. Not just for these clients, but for the system itself.